Hello, my name is Jacob Monk. I'm living here in Copenhagen, Denmark. And Denmark is one of the leading countries when it comes to Lutheranism and Reformation. In 1536, we had the Reformation in Denmark. It was introduced by our king, King Christian III. You have a picture of him here. Well, the Reformation, it came through in year 1536, but there was a time before the Reformation. And if we want to have the whole story, we have to go back to Martin Luther, when he put up his 95 theses on the church door in Wittenberg in 1517. Well, since then, quite some time went before the Reformation came to Denmark. And the Lutheran way of thinking, that is, you're saved by faith, not by deeds. You don't have a free will. Not the Pope shall be ruling the countries, but the kings and the emperors and the monarchs and the nobilities. Well, this was a way of thinking that the Danish rulers, the Danish kings really liked. And especially they liked the fact that around 40% of the land in Denmark was owned by the church, because Catholics, when they died, they wrote a will and gave their piece of land to the church. So the church was a big landowner, and that was the way that the church was able to finance the salaries of the priest, building on new churches, administration, and so on. But the kings, they wanted to have part of this power. They wanted to have money, to have soldiers, to have peasants, control over the peasants. And therefore they like the thoughts of Martin Luther, because his thoughts was that it should be forbidden to have monasteries. The church should be controlled by the state. It shouldn't own anything. And the king and the ruler should be the connection between civil persons, peasants in this world, and God in heaven. So according to Luther, there was no use for the Pope anymore. Actually, the Pope should be executed, just as well as any Catholic in the world should be executed. This was the thought of Martin Luther. Here we see a picture of Christian III, the Danish king who introduced the Reformation in Denmark. Well, don't misunderstand it. This was not some kind of civil uprising. No, not at all. It was a war. Christian III, he hired a German warlord called Johann Rantzau. And this warlord, he was a former Catholic, now changing to be a Protestant. He came to Denmark with a lot of professional soldiers, and they went up through Jutland, and they met an army of peasants. This war, it was a war between, on the one side, the soldiers, the German soldiers of Johann Rantzau, and on the other side, the Danish peasants. And in Jutland, they had a leader called Skipper Clement. He was actually, had once been a peasant himself, and he was also a sailor. So he had been in war before. He was a trained soldier, and now he recruited the Danish peasants because they wanted to keep their old religion, the Catholic religion in Denmark. But Johann Rantzau, being employed and paid by the Danish king Christian III, Johan Rantzau, he didn't want Denmark to continue being a Catholic country. So he met the peasant army and he killed more than 2,000 peasants. And then he went to the biggest town in northern Jutland, being called Aalborg. And there he conquered the town, and he told his soldiers that in 3 days they could sack the town. That meant they could kill anyone. They could rape any woman they want. They could steal anything. This was a part of their payment, and that was the way they conquered Aalborg. And they also caught the leader of the Catholic soldiers. He was called Skipper Clement, and this man, he was tortured, he was put in jail, and after a while he was beheaded in the center of Aalborg. And when Johan Rantzau had did this misdeed, paid by Christian III, then he went to Copenhagen. Copenhagen was fortified. It was a fortified city, and the citizens of Copenhagen, they also want to keep the Catholic religion. So they went to the walls of the city and defended the city against the soldiers of Johan Rantzau. But Johan Rantzau, he had strong allies and around Europe, strong Protestant allies. And these allies, they put up ships out in the harbor of Copenhagen. So it was impossible for the Catholic soldiers and citizens of Copenhagen to get food into the city. Actually, they had eaten all of the food. Well, they had even eaten the cats, they had even eaten the dogs, they had eaten everything. Then there was one Protestant mayor in the city, and he humiliated the citizens by saying, well, don't give up yet, you haven't eaten your own children yet. This was the way he was humiliating the Catholic citizens of Copenhagen. This man who had been a leader of the Protestants in Copenhagen for several years, because Protestantism had been a minority among the Copenhagen citizens for several years. And these Protestants, they had even made a sacking of one of the biggest Catholic churches in Copenhagen called Vor Frue Kirke. It means Our Lady's Church. They had made one iconoclasm. That means they had went into the church, destroyed everything, painted over the paintings on the walls, and pulling down statues of Virgin Mary and other saints. Well, they had done that quite a few years before Copenhagen was conquered by the Protestant warlord Johan Rantzau. And this happened in 1536. The citizens of Copenhagen, they just had to give up. When Christian III and Johan Rantzau, they entered into the city, the first thing they told the starving citizens was that we want to catch the Catholic bishops. And there was one special archbishop. He was called Johan Rønnow. Johan Rønnow. He was a leader of the Catholics, the Catholic priest in Copenhagen. And he had the bishop palace in the center of Copenhagen, just beside the city of Our Lady, called in Danish Vor Frue Kirke. Johan Rønnow, he knew what had happened to Skipper Clement in Aalborg. He had been beheaded. So of course he was very afraid what would happen to him. He was a member of the leading board electing the king according to the laws in Denmark. Johan Rønnow, he was among the nobility leaders of Denmark. They hadn't chosen Christian III, but they had chosen the king before him, Christian II. But unfortunately, this man was betrayed and put in jail and lived his whole life in a jail in Sønderborg in Jutland. So therefore we didn't have a king to defend Catholic Christianity in Denmark against the Protestant uprising. And now they had conquered Copenhagen, and they went first of all after the Catholic bishops. The Catholic bishop, he was hiding in his mansion between just close to Our Lady's Church. He was hiding up under the roof, but unfortunately he was found. The soldiers of Johan Rantzau found him, and they put him to jail called Blue Tower. It was a part of the fortified castle in Copenhagen. Today it's where the Danish parliament is living. It is called Christiansborg, called after a later king called Christian IV. But Christian III, he just wanted to introduce Lutheranism. So after he had jailed the Lutheran bishop, then he made his first law, and the first law was that from now on it is illegal to be a Catholic in Copenhagen and in whole Denmark, because remember, 1 year before, Jutland was conquered by the Protestant. So now the Protestant had conquered whole Denmark, and Protestantism, Lutheranism, was introduced. After a while, the first Lutheran bishops was initiated. You know, in the old days, the bishops, they were in direct line from Jesus, called apostolic succession. The bishops was initiated by bishops before them, and these bishops had been initiated by bishops even before. So the line went directly back, directly to Jesus, who had initiated the first pope called Peter, and had given him the keys to heaven. But now apostolic succession was broken, and it was illegal to be a Catholic. And after a short while, Christian III, he introduced his own translation of the Bible, made by a Protestant theologian called Hans Tausen. And this Protestant Bible was called simply the Bible. The Danes had never written the Bible before, because they couldn't read at all. And the Bible was printed in Latin, so they couldn't read it. They only knew the Bible and the church and the gospel from the churches and from the paintings on the wall of the churches. But now these paintings, they were removed. This was an order coming from Lutheran North Germany, and it was followed by Peter Palladius, who was the first Lutheran bishops after the Reformation. Thank you.